Segment 2, Gold and Black Live. And joining me is and Brian Neubert. Brian obviously with segment 1 with Tom Dienhart, but we have Jim Comparoni, the man at SpartanMag.com and the Michigan State Rivals. Jim, how long has it been? Have you been at this since, I think, about the same time I got started, even before, 97, 98, when you got started with Spartan Mag? Is that about right?
That's about right. SpartanMag.com, part of Rivals.com around that time. And prior to that, began my association with the esteemed Stu Coleman in the fall of 1993, back in the print days.
Yeah.
And parlayed that into the internet era. And here we are these years later. And I think we've created a little bit of a following, a little bit of a disturbance, and it's been fun.
Yeah, it has. And, your backdrop there is kind of, I don't know, is this your vantage points from games? And it will be at tonight's game as well, just about where you're seated at the Bresson Center and for Michigan State games?
That's right. I took that picture, with my, with the old camera, the iPhone, prior to the Rutgers game a couple of nights ago, to use as a backdrop for things like this. And that's exactly what my vantage point will be for the game tonight against Purdue. Michigan State looking to see if they can put 2 or 3 good performances together. It's been an interesting puzzle to watch Izzo try to assemble this one. It's been different than past years. He's pretty good at it, and we'll see if he can make more progress tonight.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, this will be my vantage point for the game tomorrow night too.
Right here.
Right behind me. Hey, Jim, what did Michigan State get straightened out, if anything, against Rutgers? And prior to Rutgers, when they were struggling, what was kind of the hot button issue there that was leading to their inconsistency and them struggling?
I think defense. Michigan State's been great at defense over the years, as has Purdue. Both of those teams have struggled this year with field goal percentage defense. Michigan State blown out at Minnesota a week and a half ago, but the defense was not bad in the first half. Against Minnesota, I've never seen a team hold a team in major conference basketball to 40% shooting in the first half, as Michigan State did against Minnesota, yet be behind by 20.
Yeah.
Minnesota shot 40% and was up 20 at halftime. Prior to that, Michigan State played at Northwestern to begin the Big Ten season. And the word Izzo used to describe that performance was confused. He said he was confused about his team's performance. Defense, assignments, no communication, a lot of slippage, a lot of leaks, and Northwestern ran them out of the gym. Izzo said he was looking forward to getting back to the practice court, working on defense. Saw some progress against Wisconsin on Christmas Day and some other games, the first half against Minnesota, but the offense was out to lunch. One of the things Izzo's been really good at over the years is quality control and turning and tightening the screws and turning a mediocre team into a good team, sometimes overnight. And they were a good basketball team against Rutgers earlier this week, beating a top 20 Rutgers team. Rutgers was number 15 in the country at the time. Rutgers was averaging 80 points a game. Michigan State held them to 45 points and about 30% shooting. And it was all about energy and awareness on defense. Energy and awareness on defense, which all of a sudden led to good rebounding, beat Rutgers on the boards by 20, then the transition game. And those are the staples of Michigan State. And when the defense was poor, their rebounding was poor, believe it or not, and the transition game was non-existent. So one has fed to another. They're still trying to figure out some personnel situations, but it started with defense.
Yeah, talk about, and we talked before we got this segment going a little bit off air in terms of, and I'm going to ask both of you this question because you're obviously watching in 2 venerable Big Ten venues. You talked about it. I thought it was interesting, your comment about what it's like, not at the Bresson Center, but also because you've watched some games, home games from home, but you've also been there, obviously, and you're starting to pick some certain things up. There's a certain intensity you mentioned you liked when it comes to this, even though there aren't 15,000 people at the Bresson Center.
I did. I miss the fans being there and all the energy and the bands and all those things. I do not miss the unending sponsorship announcements at every time out. Let the band play. It's just sponsorship. I don't miss that. Went to a few home games, watched a couple from home. The Christmas Day game, I didn't go to that one, watched it from home. And these days we can get the press conferences via Zoom and also rewind during the game to get a better idea of what's going on in real time for our chat rooms and so forth. Was back at the Breslin Center for the Rutgers game. And, the first few home games, it was just kind of surreal. It's great to be watching live competition again. Wow, it's strange. There's no band, no cheerleaders, no fans. And that was almost a distraction in itself. Now it's got to the point for me personally that I'm kind of past all that and I'm able to focus in on just basketball and the intensity of obviously a Big Ten basketball game this year, a top 20 game between Michigan State and Rutgers a few nights ago, the intensity, two well-coached teams battling on defense, and to hear the give and take among the players to their coaches and so forth. They're trying to pick themselves up, things that might be happening in a regular game, but it's drowned out by the crowd. And the way I describe it is it's almost like the intensity is like a high school wrestling meet. If you've been to some of those can be really intense and not a lot of people in the gym sometimes, but great competition, great intensity. And, the game against Rutgers, I thought Aaron Henry took his game to a level, not only as a player, but also in terms of leadership. And that was one thing you could hear even at the mezzanine level at Breslin Center, the things he was saying to his teammates, imploring them at crucial times, when to back it out and run some clock, when to get down on defense, communication. And Henry really struggled against Minnesota. Kalsher shut him down. And Judd Heathcote used to say that a leader really can't lead until he's comfortable with his own game. And I think we've seen Aaron Henry become comfortable in his own game the last two games, and his leadership has come to the forefront now. It's just a recent thing. We will see if that continues tonight.
Yeah, Brian, from in your perspective of watching games, how does it change your coverage watching? Because you're one that traveled to the very vast majority of Big Ten venues. When you're watching it, what do you do differently in terms of when you're watching it from home versus watching it obviously in person?
I'll tell you this, I'm becoming a spoiled diva because no lines for the men's room, don't have to ever worry about parking. I've got a 6-foot radius around me. I don't have to stand up to go to the press conference. When the fans come back, I'm going to be really inconvenienced. But other than that, what's really –
I agree. I didn't want to say it, but I'll let you say it. I kind of agree.
I have no standards. I will say anything. The other, the thing that I think is really interesting about this is hearing everything everyone says on the floor. I cover a lot of AAU basketball, and there's not a kid who goes to the basket who doesn't yell N1 every time they go to the hoop. And there's not someone playing defense who, when the other team shoots, they yell, "Oh, hell no."
I heard that in the Illinois.
Every time Jaden Ivey or whoever it is goes to the basket, you hear the N1 thing. Someone from Illinois, I think it was Coburn, maybe, every time Purdue shot the ball the other night was yelling, "Hell no, hell no." Yeah. I think that's really entertaining and really shows us, hey, it's all just basketball. I mean, these are just kids playing basketball, same as they did, in the summers when they were in high school. But in terms of what changes for me, not a whole lot. I mean, I think our coverage is largely the same. I think our coverage is largely the same when I'm home. You don't pick up the atmosphere of it all. If the press conferences were, not on Zoom, obviously there would be value in being there for the press conferences, all that stuff. But the one thing Jim had mentioned is, I think watching on TV, you get a little bit of a better chance to digest what happens a little bit more, as opposed to getting the kind of visceral part of it. I'm getting pretty good at watching the game on my laptop in my lap with my TV overhead set back about 5 seconds. So I see the play once on my laptop, and then I immediately look up and I see it again right then and there. So I basically watch the game twice real time, and that helps me process a little bit more of what happened. So there's some value there, I think, but I don't think it's all that different, to be honest with you, when I'm actually there.
You think we're going to ever go back to real? I mean, I'm sure we will go back to real press conferences, but these Zoom deals are pretty. Especially when it's media only, isn't all that bad. I mean, it's not a bad way to go and do it. How goes, Jim? I'll start with you.
I know Brian has gone to a lot of road games. He does a great job with road coverage. I've not done as many road games over the years, and getting the video of post game has been a struggle. But in the Zoom era, if that's going to be available for all road games going forward. I think it's kind of helped our coverage with road games. Can save us a lot of money for hotels and so forth. Home games, yeah, someday getting back to the old-fashioned press conferences, I miss being able to go into the locker room and ask your own questions to players rather than being one big group think going on. And also, occasionally, you can pick and choose your shots to get like one-on-one questions with Tom Izzo, like after practice or after a game, after a press conference. I wouldn't do it every single time, but once in a while to get a little more of an understanding on things. Unable to do that this year. I miss that. But the road game coverage for Zoom can be a cost cutter for a lot of news organizations without losing news content. I think that could be a good thing.
Yeah, Brian, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I certainly hope we get back as soon as can be to in-person interviews, because as Jim just said, I think it's extraordinarily valuable for me anyway, in person, to be able to ask my more stupid or more detailed questions off camera. Mm-hmm. Every now and then I would like to, I would ask Painter just kind of one-on-one, hey, this play in the second quarter, how was so-and-so supposed to guard this ball screen, that kind of stuff, just for my own personal knowledge. And now when you're on camera, it's much harder to do that. I think it's also important that, the players we cover see us and kind of know who we are a little bit, because that way you kind of get their walls down a little bit and they're a little more comfortable with you and they're a little more interesting, a little more forthcoming, things like that. Jim has it good, because Jim, I think, is one of the few schools left in college basketball with an open locker room policy, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
yeah, you're a lucky devil, man, because that is so valuable from a sports writer perspective, in my opinion. And I think that's a direction most people are going away from and not toward. Mm-hmm. I would kill for an open locker room.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been that way for 40 years here. Heathcote did it. Izzo's kept it. Yeah. And I don't know why Izzo does it strategically. He tells the players that if they want to play in the NBA, this is part of what they're going to have to do. And if they want to be a leader of the team, they need to speak for the team, and they need to keep it out. So there's those aspects of it. From a coach's standpoint, how does it benefit his team? He's all about holding players accountable. And sometimes he doesn't mind it when the media holds players accountable. There have been times when I've said, asked a question like you said, so was so-and-so, did he miss, was he supposed to hedge out that hard, or he missed the box out? And he was like, why don't you ask him that question? Maybe that's part of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Izzo.
I think Izzo and
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Izzo and Painter have a little bit, even though Purdue doesn't have the open locker room, has a little bit of the same philosophy towards media to some extent. I think that's
it's also just an opportunity for all of us to get something different too, because right now when, we're all just part of the same press conference and we're all posting the same video, and we're not really getting a whole lot that's unique. If somebody says something interesting in a press conference, it's all of our leads, as opposed to it being my lead and then somebody else has a unique lead. I think it does the readers and the consumers a service too, for us to all have different kind of viewpoints on things. But this has taken a weird turn. We were talking about Purdue, Michigan State, and now we're talking about
I know. We haven't really talked
media
about
philosophy.
Okay. That's been interesting. It's been interesting. At least it's been interesting to me, because both of you guys have been around it for so long that you have a lot to offer. All right, we will in our last 2 or 3 minutes here go back to tonight's game. Obviously, Michigan State, like I said, has the appearance of turning things around. Point guard's been an interesting issue. What will it take? Not necessarily against Purdue. I mean, Jim, what you've seen in Purdue over the years. They're not all that much different in some ways tonight, but what does it take for Michigan State? I'll ask Jim that question. I'm going to turn around and ask Brian to say, what does it take for Purdue to make this game go into the final 3 or 4 minutes? So, Jim, you fire away first.
I think Michigan State has to avoid turnovers. They had 14 turnovers in the first half against Rutgers. 4 in the second half. Turnovers have been a problem. They've had trouble figuring out the point guard situation at Michigan State. They've settled in on true freshman A.J. Hoggard, a guy that went to prep school, West Virginia, from Coatesville, Pennsylvania. An interesting change for Izzo. They began the season with Rocket Watts as the point guard, a sophomore, and the quarterbacking decisions just weren't quite what they need to be. And in practice, which we've not been able to attend, apparently Izzo has seen enough that he thinks that the decision-making for this team to reach whatever its potential is, has a better chance to get there with Hogard. And Hogard was a little bit overweight earlier in the year because he had a little knee issue and so forth. So that is really a work in progress. And a strange change for Izzo at this point in the season to change horses at the point guard position. He's done it a couple other times, notable occasions. 2003, he had Chris Hill, an Indiana guy, playing point guard as a sophomore, and changed it in January, went with Allen Anderson, a future NBA player, 6'6" type of guy, moved him to point guard. They went on a roll, went to the Elite Eight, lost to Texas, didn't make the Final Four, but that season was almost lost. Did it again in 2005, again taking Chris Hill off the point, brought Drew Neitzel off the bench as a true freshman, point guard, went to the Final Four. Both of those seasons were really on the brink. This year, same thing. True freshman off the bench. And it wasn't a guy that was playing well and in games and forcing himself into the starting lineup. I mean, we hadn't seen him play much at all. He was not in the playing group. And then all of a sudden he plays 15 minutes at the point against Minnesota. Next game he's starting. Really a stark change. Since he's gone to the point, we'll see whether it continues tonight, but since he's gone to the point, Langford, Henry have forced fewer shots. It seems like they're less, just a small sample size, but less concerned with creating their own shot in a hectic, harried type of way. I'm not saying that Hogard is a great distributor, but it's good enough. The ball moves well enough, and that has helped other players become better versions of themselves. Rutgers played good pressure defense in the backcourt. Purdue will do the same, even though their stats are not what they normally are. So Michigan State's going to have to navigate that. But for Michigan State, it begins with getting their own operation with some traction with that against pressure defense again, with Hogard continuing as the experiment true freshman point guard.
All right, Brian, what about Purdue in a minute or so with the obvious? It's finished the job.
Well, I think it comes down to a lot of things, but obviously as every game does, but I think, Purdue's got to do whatever it has to do to keep Michigan State at transition. I mean, Purdue's got to rebound with them. Purdue's got to obviously keep the turnovers to a minimum. Easier said than done. That's been their the knife sticking out of their back all year. But they just cannot let Michigan State get out in transition. And you look at the Illinois game, the deeper Purdue's guards got off the dribble, the worse it got, because they missed or they turned the ball over, and Illinois was going the other way. That's just the single biggest thing. Purdue's got to make Michigan State earn everything offensively in the half court. That means keeping them out of transition. That means making sure their defense is established and they're getting good offensive possessions first and foremost. They've got to get Travion Williams going. I would think that Michigan State might be a little vulnerable defensively in the post. Travion Williams has had some success against Michigan State before. So I think you have to get good offensive possessions built around Travion Williams, and you just have to do everything you can to keep Michigan State out of the open floor, as is the case every year against Michigan State.
Yeah, going to be interesting, guys. Hey, thanks so much, and we will continue our media philosophy discussion next time we're on the show, because I think it's, at least I'm always energized and entertained by that. Jim, Happy New Year to you. Thanks so much for your time, and best to you and your family. And we'll look forward to days when we can physically see each other again, maybe out in Vegas before long. Let's hope so from that standpoint. All right, we will, Yanni Karloftis will join us for segment 3. We'll take a short break, and we'll know the answers to all these questions here in about 3 or 4 hours when the Boilermakers in Michigan State take to the hardwood in East Lansing. So stay tuned for segment 3 of Gold and Black Live.